Hello, this is Mark from Productive Computing and Productive Computing University. You are about to watch a selected JSON lesson from our free course called JSON Fundamentals for FileMaker Developers. Knowing how to create, parse, and manipulate JSON is essential in order to integrate FileMaker with the world of APIs, Claris Connect, artificial intelligence, and more. In this complete course, we'll cover everything you need to know about JSON from the perspective of a Claris FileMaker Pro developer. We're making this course available for free because we feel it's an important and essential building block for you to understand in order to advance your skills to the next level. And once you learn how to manipulate JSON formatted text, you are that much closer to accomplishing your first API integration in your own FileMaker apps. And like all our other courses at Productive Computing University, this course comes complete with downloadable FileMaker files for you to use and follow along with. These downloadable files are available directly in selected lessons inside the course. There's a link in the description to enroll in this free course called JSON Fundamentals for FileMaker Developers at productivecomputinguniversity.com. Okay, now let's dive into the lesson. In this lesson, we continue creating JSON for invoices and line items. This is part 2, where we take the line item portion and inject that into the existing invoice portion. So here we have the existing core CRM file that we've been working on. I'll jump over to sales, and then I'll make sure that my custom menus are standard so that I can get under the hood. Where we last left off, we had a script that we were working on. It was called Create JSON for Sales Invoices. So we are looping through every main record. Now we need to loop through the line items and capture the line item detail for each invoice. But while we do that, we want to make sure that we're still associated with the main parent record. So for this, we will need a second loop after the first. So let me make some space here, and we'll add another loop. Now, this loop will have to keep track of the total records. There's a couple ways you could approach this. You could go to the related records and end up being on the line items table and gather the records that way. But I think that's a lot of jumping around between this layout and a line items layout. If we just stay on this layout, we don't have to keep going back and forth, but we will have to keep track of the total record count of our line items in order to know when to exit the loop properly. So for that, we're going to need a new variable for iterating over those line items. So we'll set a variable and we will call it I. And we will make that equal to 1. So single $I equals 1, and that sets the stage to know exactly where we are, because we will be getting these records using the getEnthRecord function, which allows us to pluck a related record while being here on the main invoice layout or the main sales layout. This will make a little bit more sense when you see me build it here in this secondary loop. So we've already started our JSON up here, so I'm going to duplicate this script step. It'll act as a reference when we create our line items. So let me go into this formula here. So this is the path we have so far. We have invoices and then a field name. Now to create fields in the line items, I'll just append to this. We'll remove the ID. And we'll say line items, and we'll introduce yet another new marker, and then we'll put a dot for our line item fields. Now, before I go any further, it's important to make note that I don't want to increment the record here because I've already incremented it in the script step above over here on number 7. So we want to keep this same key. Whatever index the key is on for invoices needs to stay the same. The only index we're incrementing is the one for line items, and we're only going to do that once. In fact, just to avoid all the confusion here, let me just remove the fields that aren't going to apply to this and just focus on the line items path. So we get invoices.lineItems, and this will be in the format of an array, and we need our line item field. So let's just say item ID. Or ID item. Now, in order to get the related record based on the row, we'll need to use the function getEnthRecord. So I will call that now getEnthRecord, and it needs a field and a record number. So the field it'll need is going to be based on this relationship, which I happen to know is this one, sales LI. And the field I want is going to be the ID item. Now the record number will be the iteration, is something that we're already taking care of with this $I. So $I will be the record number that we'll use. And this will be a JSON string for argument's sake. And that should complete our first field. So let's just take another extra moment and identify what's going on here. We're saying create JSON and append it to the existing JSON on this path, which is invoices, and that will piggyback off the path that we had up here, but it will add a new key or a new array called line items, and the field within the line items would be ID item, and then we just grab the data. The data will be grabbed directly on this layout, so we're using the getEnthRecord to pull the ID item based on a record number, which represents the number here in the portal, or the number of the first related record, and we're presenting that as a string. So that's the whole line there. I'll paste this here for the next line. Now we don't want to put a plus here anymore. We want to do the existing index for line items, and then we'll pick another field. We've got the ID item. So let's just see, how about item name? That would represent this field here. Item name. We still need the getEnthRecord, but I just need item name. And now it's just more of the same. Just grab the rest of the fields you need and make sure they're named the way you want to name them. How about description? Okay. And quantity. I could put QTY to keep it consistent with the field name in the core. Because we know it's a number, we'll go ahead and format it as a number. That takes care of quantity. Then we need item price, I think. Unit price is good. Type a U, there's the unit price. That'll also be a number. Next, we need the amount, which would be the unit price times the quantity. Now, technically speaking, if I wanted to gather the least amount of data, I could gather the quantity and the unit price and then do the calculation after the fact for total. But in this case, I'll just grab the amount. We won't have to calculate it later on. It all depends on exactly what you're using this JSON for and your overall approach to the project. I think that's good for now, so I'll remove that end semicolon, and we'll accept this as our loop. And then how do we know how many times to loop? We're going to need the total count of records. So before I get there, let me just duplicate this variable, and we will iterate the loop so that we say $I equals $I plus 1. And then for our exit loop, we need to grab the total records. So I'll duplicate this variable again and put into a new variable, total records. You can name your variables however you like to. Sometimes I like to spell them out when more description is needed. Sometimes I like to keep them simple, like with the $I, known as the iterator. Total records, we want to calculate that, and that will be the value count of the list of the field sales line item. And let's just say the ID. That's a pretty accurate way to get the total. And then when we exit the loop, so exit loop if the total records equals $I, that means we need to put this before it iterates. So as this goes through, it will count the records, the $I will increment, and once it reaches our total records, it will exit out the loop before proceeding. Now this loop is within a loop, so these line items will happen in conjunction with the main record. So it'll go to the main record, grab what it needs there, loop and append to that JSON, and then go to the next record, and so on and so forth. After all that's done, we'll format the JSON, and everything will be as it should be. So now let's run this through debugger. Once you have a loop within a loop, Generally speaking, you want to run it through debugger so you can watch it very closely and figure out if you've made any errors. Okay, so I'll run the debugger on and we'll proceed. Oh, let's try that. That was a triggered script. Okay, there's my first JSON. And now it's going to count the records. So here I want to make sure that it found a valid count. It should see a 1 here for that. Total records is 1. And my $I is also 1. So far so good. There's my JSON. And because there was only one record, it exited that loop. And now it's on to the second record here. The second record has 4. So let's just check that out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Seems to be working okay. Now, before I get to the end, let me just show you a trick here. I want to check on my JSON. So I will click on the last step and then tell the script debugger to start there. And then I'll just run it real quick. And that will format the JSON that I currently have just to make sure I have it right. So as we look at this together, we see invoices is my key. There's my invoice parent record. Then we create an array and we have one record with its fields. And notice how these are lined up properly because my pathing was correct. I started with my invoice path when I defined this amount. Then we come to the second record, second parent record. There it is. And then we had 4 line items. There they all are. Things I watch for besides the indenting and to make sure that it's all part of a parent-child relationship. I double check to see that these fields in the data look correct, just to make sure that I've named everything correctly and pulled the right fields. Now, when JSON is created by FileMaker and these functions, it always puts it in alphabetical order. That's why I have D followed by G followed by I followed by L. That's why my line items are sitting here. But below that, you see status and type. So don't let that throw you. You might be under the impression that you created the first part of the JSON on its own script step, so why aren't these fields tucked up under these fields? And that's because line item is a key at the same level as all these other fields. The only difference is line item as a key is really an array of multiple items, but its key is commingled with the other keys in alphabetical order. Okay, so now I'll push OK and we'll run this one final time. Let me halt the script. And this time I'll run it without debugger. So I'll go right to the scripts menu and create JSON for sales. Watch the speed of this. I think it's already done. So I'll go to my JSON here and I should have 100 parent records and any number of line items associated with that. Perfect. Okay, so that concludes this segment of the course where we learn how to create JSON manually based on a real-world scenario of an invoice or a sales order where we have the parent record, the child records, and a loop within a loop. Thanks for joining us on this lesson. To enroll in the free complete course, click on the link in the description or visit productivecomputinguniversity.com, where you'll find both free and paid courses on today's most important topics related to the Claris FileMaker platform.